Separation of substances. These are some examples of separation of substances. Grains separated from stalks. Milk churned to butter. Gin cotton to separate the seeds from fiber. Why do we separate substances? We separate substances to remove harmful or non-useful substances from the useful substances. For example, removing stones that are harmful from rice, and rice is useful substance. The different methods of separation: hand picking, threshing, winnowing, sieving, sedimentation and decantation, filtration, evaporation, condensation. The first method is hand picking. We pick stones with hand from rice. This method can be used if the impurities are larger in size and less in quantity. The second method is threshing. Plucking grains one by one from stalk is difficult, so we use threshing method. In this method, the stalks are beaten to free the grain seeds. Winnowing. Grains are made of seed and husk. Seeds are heavier than husk. We can separate husk from the seeds by winnowing. Winnowing is a process by which wind is used to blow away lighter particles like husk from heavier particles like seed. Sieving. Sieve is a net with holes. We can remove impurities like husk and stones from wheat flour by pouring the flour into the sieve. The fine flour particles will pass through the holes of sieve while the husk will remain on sieve. Sedimentation and decantation. There might be dust on rice. While washing rice, we add water to it and the dust gets separated from rice. We can see that the water turns muddy. We will then tilt the vessel and pour out the dirty water. In this process, the rice, being heavier, settles down. This process of settling down of heavier particles is called sedimentation. In this case, rice being heavier settles down. So rice gets sedimented. Here in the picture we can see water contains insoluble impurities. And when these insoluble impurities are allowed to settle, you get the clear water. This is an example of sedimentation. So this method can be used to separate When water along with the dust is poured out, the process is called decantation. So when we tilt the water out, that tilting process is called decantation. So the heavier particles will settle down, that is called sedimentation, and the tilting process is called decantation. The next method is filtration. After boiling tea leaves in water, we can remove tea leaves by using a strainer. When tea is poured into the strainer, tea leaves will remain in the strainer and the tea passes through it into the cup. This process is called filtration. We can also separate tea leaves from tea by sedimentation method, where tea leaves will be allowed to settle down and tea can be decanted into the cup. See in the picture you can see after boiling tea leaves with water, you strain it through the strainer. So what gets collected in the strainer is tea leaves and you will get the tea separated from the tea leaves. The tea leaves can be thrown later. How can we separate soil from water? We can separate soil from water by the following methods. We can either do sedimentation and then decantation. So soil will remain at the bottom and then you can separate water. Another method how we can separate soil from water is by filtration, where we can use filter paper to filter. In the given picture, you can see that the sand is getting collected inside the filter paper when you pour sandy water and the water gets collected in the conical flask. Evaporation. When water is boiled, it gets converted to water vapor or steam. This process is called evaporation. Evaporation takes place in nature too. With sun's heat, the water from the water bodies gets converted to water vapor in the atmosphere. Similarly, when we boil water also, the water gets converted to steam, that is water vapor. This method can be used for separating salt from seawater. When seawater is evaporated using sunlight, we can get salt. Condensation. The process of converting water vapor into water is called condensation. So this process is reverse of evaporation. In evaporation, water is converted to water vapor, but in condensation, water vapor is converted to water. This is how rains are formed. If we hold a cold plate above boiling water, we can see that the water vapor will touch the cold plate and become water drops on plate. Sometimes we will have to use more than one method for separation. If a mixture of sand and salt is present inside water, how will we separate both from water? In this case, first we can use sedimentation and decantation method. The sand will settle down at the bottom and it can be separated by decantation. If you have to separate salt also from water, then we can use evaporation method. When we boil the salt water, the water will evaporate, leaving the salt behind at the bottom. So in this way we can separate sand and salt which is present inside water. Hence sometimes we have to use more than one method to separate substances. Solution. What is a solution? A solution is made by dissolving a substance in a liquid. For example, when we dissolve salt in water, we get salt solution. When we dissolve sugar in water, we get sugar solution. Water, salt, salt solution. So when we dissolve sugar in water or salt in water, then we can call it as solution. What is a saturated solution? When we add salt to water, at first it dissolves. As we add more and more salt into water, we find that salt is not dissolving in water. It settles at the bottom. This solution is said to be saturated as no more salt can be dissolved in it. Effect of heat in dissolving substances. If we are heating that saturated salt solution, we can dissolve more salt in it. This shows that more quantity of salt can be dissolved in water on heating.